See, it is written that tzaddik is the foundation of the world. Right? In the words before, that's where we left off. What you just discussed, now that's where we left off. So Chbira Inyan to explain all the above. Al pi ma shekosav Harav Chaim Vital Zal B'Shara Kedusha Beitz Chaim Shar Nun Perik Beis, based on what Rav Chaim Vital, which we know Rav Chaim Vital was the favorite Talmud of the Arizal, and he writes in his Sefer, in the Shara Kedusha, which means the portal of holiness, of sanctity, and he has a sefer called Eitz Chaim. Shar Nun, the 50th portal of Eitz Chaim, and the way he divided and compartmentalized his Svarim was in Sha'arim, in gates and portals, and in every portal there's chapters. So in the 50th portal, the second chapter, this he writes. Now we know that Rav Chaim Vital was, as I mentioned, it says clearly that the whole Kabbalah we have the Arizal is precisely the way it's channeled through Rav Chaim Vital's understanding. So Al Rebbe brings him in the first page of Tanya. What does he write? What does Rav Chaim Vital write? The L'cholish Yisrael, next page. L'cholish Yisrael lechad tzadik v'echad rasha shtei neshamas. Every yid, every tzaddik, a tzaddik or a rasha, possesses two souls. Right? The class is called The Tale of Two Souls. Here we begin entering into that, into the two souls phenomenon.
It's only Jewish people have to.
Yes, correct. We will see in the end of this chapter itself. But a tzaddik or a rasha, they have two souls, like it says, and it's a pasuk which is written that Hashem says, "Neshamais ani asisi," I created neshamis, and there in that context, it doesn't mean many people, because if you're dealing with multiple people, so grammatically makes sense neshamis ani asisi, even though you have one neshama, right? You have 10 people, and Hashem says, I created their neshamis. It makes sense to say it plural. But there in that context, he's not talking about multiple people. He's talking about the individual has neshamais, which is plural. Which means, had it been a yid only have one neshama, whatever that neshama would be made of, or what would that neshama would consist of, it would be neshama ani asisi. So neshamais means plural, indicating that every Jew, Cholish Yisrael, as you were saying, it says clearly, every Jew has a tzaddik or a rasha has two neshamas. Shein shtei nefashos, the two life forces. Nefesh achas mitzad haklipa v'sitra achar. So, in the end of this chapter, the Alter Rebbe deals with the first, and he deals with the negative, or the other side, as it's called, sitra achra. The other side, in the beginning of the second chapter, Alter Rebbe deals with the second and the sanctified neshama, the holy neshama, which is nefesh elikis. Actually, the second chapter begins with nefesh shenis b'Yisrael, the second soul. So why would Alter Rebbe begin with the negative soul, right? Why not with the positive? Because it says a number of places. Because it says, when does the neshama completely enter into the system of the person, to the body of the person, is when he's bar mitzvah. It says it has the first time. Now a person definitely has, when he's born with a neshama. The question is when it finds its position. It says by the bris, it says that it enters. It's a lashon Shulchan Aruch. Shulchan Aruch, the Rebbe brings in Shulchan Aruch. By the bris, again, it sets in mode that it's ready to function, and therefore even a child is always told, and he always, and even in his consciously, he knows that there's the voice of the Yetzer Tov and the voice of the Yetzer Hara. So it's there. The Nefesh Elikis, is definitely there. But where does it completely fit? In other words, where is it completely adjusted within the person is when he becomes bar mitzvah, because then he's responsible. So he has to have the equal forces. So it says to give him the Yitzhara Agdem Mitanisa. In other words, he comes before, and therefore the Alter Rebbe begins. One of the reasons why the Alter Rebbe begins with the klip and sitrach, in other words, with the negative neshama, and then the beginning of the second chapter, and there's nefesh elikis. Many times you have it b'chlal in Torah. You have the Torah before Torah, David that deals with the Teiv. But Esav, it says that David dealt with Esav, and then once Esav is there, then Yaakov is there to take over and to melt him and to transform him and so on. It's a similar idea. So the Alter Rebbe continues, says, Nefesh achas inside the klipa sitra achra. One soul comes from the side of klipa and sitra achra, which is the negative. Now the expression of klipa literally means a shell. right? Shell. When you look at it, any fruit, what's the more important part of the fruit? Is the fruit itself. The shell is just a covering over the fruit. Take an orange. You take the shell, you throw it out. And for that matter, it says klipa kodma lepri. It says even the klipa comes before the shell. The way it grows, most of the fruits grow firstly the shell, and then as it expands, then the fruit develops inside. So the klipa comes before, but the klipa is used as a negative term. Because again, the klipa is something you throw out, and the main thing is the fruit. And so to this nefesh, it's called, comes from the klipa, which is generally it's a term for tumah, for the spirit of impurity. It's called klipa. We find it many across Kabbalah and Zayir and Chassidus. Sitra Achra, also called the other side, which it's a if you think about it, it's a brilliant name. I mean, it's based on Torah, but if you think about it, it really defines what the Nefesh Bahamis is, because Sitra Achra means you don't even dignify it with a name. It's the other side. What team are you on? The other team. You don't have a name. Why don't you have a name? You don't have a name to take pride with the name? No, you don't. It's just the other side. It shows that there's the real side. The real side is Kedusha, associated with the Likud, with godliness, with Torah and mitzvahs, and that's what's real. Anything which is not aligned with Kedusha is just called Sitra Achra, the other side. We don't dignify with it. It's similar to darkness. The darkness is the absence of light. It's not something real, tangible. I mean, there's a shita, there's an opinion which says darkness also has its kind of reality. It says Yetzereru Beirei Cheshach. Beirei Cheshach means he creates darkness. We say it every day in davening. It's based on a pasuk in Tanakh. So it seems like it is an entity, but on the surface, you think about darkness is just the absence of light. How do you get rid of darkness? You don't chase it out with a stick. You just open up a light. So it shows that it's not something which is tangible. It's not something which is real. It's something to give significance and importance. So too, Sitra Achra means it's not to be dignified. It's just the other side. It's unfortunately it has an effect, and it nudges us all throughout our life. This other nefesh, this spirit, this soul, and we have a challenge with it. You can't say it's really nothing, but if you want to really classify it, you see that the truth of the matter is that it's just given to the person in order the person should overcome his challenges. That Torah mitzvahs should be done and be performed by choice. So you have to have the other side, and it definitely does its damage, or brings the challenge and obstacles in our Avodas Hashem. But what is it? Anything which is not associated with Kedusha should not be and is not dignified with any name. It's just called the other side. Now, V'hi HaMislabesh is this nefesh. On the other hand, it's a nefesh. The Eibishter says in Neshama Isani Asisi. So it is a nefesh. This nefesh is mislabeshes v'dam ha'adam. It invests in the blood of the man l'hachis haguf, to vitalize the body. Meaning that what is the connection of body and soul? And we're not dealing over here with the godly soul because again, he did not enter into the godly soul. We said that's the second nefesh which he deals with in the second chapter. Here he's dealing with the nefesh which gives the person his basic life vitality, and that invests in the blood, because the blood is the you could even call it mediator or the intermediary between soul and body. It's conducive to receive the energy of the nefesh, where a person could function, live, breathe, function. Is all that combination of the soul which invests in the blood, because the blood again is a keli to the nefesh, and physically also, a person doesn't have enough blood, unfortunately he can't live. What is it with the blood? Put in something else. Put in water. A person needs also some water as well. But generally, the blood is what keeps the person going. Reviz dam. He has to have this amount measurement of what's with the blood, because the blood is conducive to receive the energy of the nefesh, and ultimately lahach saguf, which brings life to the body. So vihi, that nefesh mislabeshes, invests in the blood of man to give life to the body. Ukidiksiv, like it says, it's a clear pasuk in the Torah, Bereshis. That where is the nefesh habasa? Where is this flesh? Where is the soul of a man of flesh? Is in the blood. And when men know from this nefesh, boys, kol hamidis rois, come all the negative character traits which exist within man. Mi arba yisaydis roim sheba, from the four negative and evil elements. We know everything is comprised from the four elements, famous four elements, which, to repeat them, Eish, Ruach, Mayim, Afer, which is fire, air, and water, and dust, and earth. These are the four elements which comprises everything. Rambam, we just learned it recently as well, that this is the four Yesaides, which is these four elements which, as the Rambam writes, that ultimately everything has a bit of the four elements. My question is how much of the Eish it has, how much of the Ruach it has, or how much of both does it have, in other words, it makes it look and function the way it does. So everything is ultimately, again, the Rambam deals with it in length, that everything is a combination, is comprised from the four elements. Spiritually as well, the Nefesh has also these four elements, but because it's a nefesh abahamis, as Alter Rebbe would use the term, it comes from klipin sitrach, which means from the impure side. What kind of character traits would it produce? Not anything refined, not anything holy, not anything pure. Quite on the contrary, midei sarais, negative character traits, negative attributes. And he goes on, and he itemizes them. He says kas v'gaiva, anger, haughtiness, narcissism, comes from Yesod Ha'esh, comes from the foundation of fire. Sheneg b'lamayla, fire is sense of high, right? Contrary to everything else in creation, everything gravitates downwards. Fire is the only thing that ascends on high. Everything. And the reason it says, and the Rambam himself explains, everything ultimately goes to its shadish, to its source, but getting to deal with it the way it is in the nefesh, it's because the character of anger and haughtiness is milmatal and negbalamayla. It shoots on high. It shoots for high. Means if a person's haughty, he doesn't allow himself, just to be in the middle. He always prioritizing, ascends himself. I'm higher, I'm better, and so on. And so to the idea of kas, anger, you don't need to find the attribute, the character of anger in its association with fire. You don't need to look very far. He's fiery. He's angry. He's like a torch of fire. And it's used in common language as well, because this is the nature of anger, that it ascends like fire, like a flame and a torch of fire. So these negative character traits of kas and gaiva come from the fire element which exists within the nefesh. Then you have taivas hatanugim, the lust. You turn third to the last page. Right, the taivas hatanugim, which is the lust what one has for the lights and pleasures which exists within this world and this reality which we live in, right? And as we mentioned last week, or the week before rather, the last time we learned over here, that the nefesh bahamis, this soul, not necessarily it jumps to tell the person to do bad, to do things which are evil. Not necessarily does it begin so, or not necessarily its initial function says be a bad person, harm somebody. Ultimately, and that's what this brilliant term of the Alter Rebbe, calling this nefesh not Yetzer Hara. He does mention periodically throughout Tanya about the term Yetzer Hara, and we'll soon see where he's used Yetzer Hara, where does he use nefesh bahamis. But usually, the Alter Rebbe deals with this nefesh. He calls it nefesh bahamis, the animal soul. If you look at an animal. An animal's not there, there's a reason why, in halacha, it says that if you leave your animal in a certain place and it eats up whatever's in front of it, doesn't belong to the person, he wasn't allowed to have his animal in that particular place. He has to pay nezek shalom, he has to pay complete nezek, complete whatever damage that his animal caused, because man is responsible for, just like he's responsible for himself, he's responsible for his animal as well. When it comes to an animal goring, this is the first 3 times that it would gore. The tam is the first 2, and anyways, the first 3 times that it gores, he's only chayiv chatzi nezek, a half of damage. Why so? Because it's not in the character of an animal to gore another animal, right? The chayes, lions, in other words, the beasts, the more aggressive animals, they take the form of their lifestyles. They prey on other animals. it's not the character of a even an ox, a cow. They have their horns. The goat also has his horns, and if they get angry, they can go ahead and gore, and that's what it says. If after multiple times, the owner is chayiv nezek shalim, is chayiv a complete nezek. But why is it different than all the other damages that one is responsible for his animal? The answer is because the animal's nature is, sees food in front of it, doesn't ask who it is, just eats it, so you're responsible. If it breaks a wall or if it walks in someone else's field, it damages with its footsteps, you're also chayiv, you're also obligated because that's the nature of the animal. It's not embedded in the nature of the animal, and a normal, healthy, especially a domestic animal, to gore other animals. But in the same token, it can gore, and it could lead up to a state that you ultimately will be chayiv for everything after a few times. And this is the same thing that Alter Rebbe brilliantly uses the expression of this, or defines this nefesh. Doesn't use the term Yetzer Hara, because if you say Yetzer Hara, you're using the word Ra, evil. Right? And evil, you think about someone evil, you say he's an evil person. You see very deep-rooted evil character, which you don't want to even cross this person when you think about it. You think about an animal, and this is again, Alter Rebbe calls it Nefesh HaBahamis, the animal soul, because the animal also, he can ultimately gore. If he doesn't get his way, he can gore, or he would gore. But what is the animal? Is just whatever, if you want to define the animal, how would you define the animal? Whatever contributes to its comfort, that's what it does. He wants to eat and gives himself a spread to sleep. He wants to scratch his back. He gives a little scratch on the fence. Whatever you want to define the animal, whatever contributes to its comfort, that's what it is. So that's the definition of the animal. And you don't allow it. You take it away. He can get aggressive. He can gore, and he could definitely do things which are much different than in his initial state, in his initial character. The same thing when you're dealing with the Nefesh HaBahamis. And again, Alter Rebbe so interestingly calls Nefesh HaBahamis because the Nefesh HaBahamis initially doesn't mean to do bad, or even in the context of Ben Adam Lamakim, between man and Hashem. In other words, not only between man and his fellow friend, man, it doesn't want to dafkas. The character of this Nefesh HaBahamis, as we're going to go on and see, just whatever is natural, that's what it does. To get angry, to be haughty, and here he speaks about giving into I like that, I saw that, I want that, I desire that, I'm going to have it. That's anything wrong? It depends. If it's something which is, it could be wrong even in the context of Kedusha, but let's say I like it so much, and what if I find out that I'm in the middle of enjoying it, and then I find out it's also, it's treif, it's not kosher. Am I going to stop right there? Or maybe not. Because, again, if you're aggressive, you can become aggressive, because once you enter into that animalistic mode, where's the light? Where's the red light? Where's the stop sign? You push away the stop sign a little bit. Stop eventually, maybe, when I see the consequences. And so the Alter Rebbe goes on over here. He says there's the Eish, and there's the Seidamayim, the Taivas HaTanugim, the pleasures, the lusts and desires for pleasures which man is inclined comes from the animal soul and comes from Misaid Hamayim. This is the water, and there was the element of water, because what's the connection with water? Because water, matzmichim kol min time, all vegetation comes from water, and other things when water contribute to the delicacies of life. So when you look for that taiva, that temptation, what the Nefesh HaBahamis has to all these worldly matters, what element would you align it with? We just say Hamayim, with the element of water. Then we find within the Nefesh HaBahamis, let's call it us, within us of Hailus V'Litzanis, V'Spidus, Udvarim B'Teilim. And here you're dealing with the Litzanis is laughter. Hailus is also a type of laughter. It's frivolity, and the Litzanis is the beyond control type of laughter, or letting loose or so. Hispairos is a type of haughtiness as well. And we're going to see in a moment why this comes from and associated with a different element. And then Dvarim B'Teilim, which is word in vain. People talk. Just talk in vain. B'Teilim means say there's nothing good or nothing structured. And no, that doesn't mean nothing structured, and it means that no yeshiva is going to be built out of this talk. No, you don't have to go to that extreme. Nothing structured happens from this talk. Just loose tongue. that comes from the element of ruach, again one of the four elements, eish ruach mayim. Of a ruach, which is air, you look at the air, air is from all the four elements, it has the least, it's the least tangible. And if you think about these four characters, start in Dvarim B'Teilim, air, it's all talk air. You say it's all air. This talk is all air. You didn't say anything. It's all air. What are you trying to say? It's all air because it didn't produce anything, and it's not there to create it to lead to something structured. That's why it comes from the element of ruach. So to Hailis Litzanis, this laughter, extra laughter, this letting loose, it's all air because again there's nothing structured to it. And the only thing we have to understand why he's sparus, which is also some type of haughtiness as well. What is the difference this? And we just said that haughtiness comes from Aish associated with fire, and the answer is very clear. Because there's two types of haughtiness. One, that the person has something to be haughty about. He has this quality and that quality and that quality, and he's a talented person, so he has many reasons why to be haughty. But we know that it's silly for man to be haughty. Not only it's an unholy character, a person who thinks a little bit of himself as a human being, that ultimately we are nothing, where we originate and where the person goes. There's no reason, there's no justified reason for man to really be haughty about himself and to get overly excited about himself. In Moshe Rabbeinu, which had all the reasons in the world, he was Moshe, which from Kabbalah Torah Sinai, he could have been a little bit, it's called, like we say, excited about himself. It says Moshe Ha'onav, he was humble. Mikol ha'odam asher al pnei adam, from all man within all humanity. Because Moshe knew the truth, that what's a man? A man is only what God gives him, and even he does have a talent. Moshe always Rabbeinu himself felt if God would give this talent, would he gave me to anybody else, he would probably do better, because he realized everything what man has, even things which he himself developed and worked on, it's all comes from God. His whole mitzvah, his whole entity comes from God. The fact that he's alive, the fact that he woke up in the morning, comes from God. And he's healthy, and he's able to function, he's able to utilize those talents which he has, or the talents themselves, they're gifted from God. So, it's not really him, there's no justified reason for a person to be haughty. But at least he has something. Hispirus means someone's haughty for no reason. Like you see people, they have nothing, they're not talented, they're not particularly nice, they're not balid tzedakah, they're not particularly intelligent, they're not learned, no qualities, and they stand with their nose up. That's real air. That's real. That's why it's called. That's why he puts it into another category, because that's ruach, air. There's nothing to it. Then you have the final characters from. Probably there's subdivisions in all of them, as we can even know within ourselves. But he just generalizes these characters. Ba'atzlus from the element of afar, which is dust, is laziness and depression, if you want to use that word. I don't know if it's accurate, but it's melancholy, which is sort of the idea of depression. In other words, it's not accurate. Depression is not accurate, but it's the idea of the person feeling down. That's Sayyid Ha'afar, because Afar is from all the four Yesaitis, from all the four elements. As we learned in Rambam, it's the lowest. It exists within the lowest. Within the ball of the world, within the universe, there's the most central of all of them is the upper. Around the upper is the water, and then around the water is the air, and on top of that is the Seid Ha'esh. So, in other words, the lowest, and it's something which you could see also in our daily life. We walk on the afar, because the afar is something which we attribute it to something which is low, and in a fallen, and something which is like a fallen state, a state of lowliness. And this is what the character of Atzlus and Atzlus, laziness. I could do it, I should do it, and I have the energy to do it, but I'm lazing out. That's like the idea of afar. So too, when you're dealing with Atzlus, this downness, if you will, it's like I could do it, I have the energy to do it, but I'm right now down. That's associated with Afar. So these are the four elements which exist in all levels of creation. So exist within the Nefesh itself. But what do they produce? Where do you see the characters align with them? So each one, again, is divided, is compartmentalized. Alter Rebbe compartmentalizes these different, and classified the different Midas Rois, which means negative character traits, with these four elements which exist within man, within the Nefesh, this Nefesh. Here the Alter Rebbe says a little chidush. Until now we were speaking about Midas Rois. He the Alter Rebbe said they got me this teva shebeteva kol yisrael today. Even the good character traits which exist within the nature of every yid by birth, similar to pity, and which exists, and Gemilas Chasadim, which means the extending kindness, wanting to compassion and extending kindness to one another, which the Gemara says, it's a Gemara which says this is the simon of a Jew. The sign of a Jew is that the Gemara mentions the third one. There's a reason the Rebbe writes somewhere why the Alter Rebbe omitted the third one, that by shanim, Jews are shy people. The sign, the siman of a yud. It says siman yesh b'umazu. There's simanim there that this nation has signs, and if you might even see even more so that when people don't have this, it's questionable. You don't have to right away chas v'sholem passel them, but you got to realize there's something wrong if they don't have it, because the sign of a Jew is that he's compassionate, he extends kindness, and the third one, he's by shanim, he's shy. So where do these characters come from? So the Alter Rebbe says, interestingly, that also from the Nefesh HaBahamis. As we mentioned before, that the Nefesh HaBahamis, again, the Alter Rebbe doesn't call it Yetzer Hara, because if we were dealing with Yetzer Hara, where does Midas Taivis, good characters, such as being compassionate, or extending kindness, as an example, where is that association? How could you associate it with Ra? But the Alter Rebbe says in the Nefesh HaBahamis, there's a certain good part to an animal. It could be caring for its own children, and it could be caring for others. They don't particularly share, but they know how to live together. Maybe they know how to live together even better than men, right? They don't go to therapy. They sit. They somewhat know how to. They know how to harmonize. They live in harmony. There's something good about them, because ultimately it's an animal, especially when dealing with a kosher animal. They're not everything about them is ra. Similarly, the fact that it comes by nature, in other words, the nature of the yid, it's not something that he did with his avodah, with his service. In other words, anything which is not within the context of avodas Hashem, serving God, making a choice, overcoming a challenge, not necessarily that it's associated with the nefesh elokis, the godly soul. It doesn't mean the godly soul doesn't have any of Rachmanis and Gemel Chasadim. Sure, the godly soul would be the easiest. In other words, to attribute compassion with a godly soul is obvious. Gemilas Chasadim is obvious. But the question is, at what point is the person ready to extend himself to do this Gemilas Chasadim or to have this Rachmanis? Right? A nefesh elokis, an expression of the Rachmanis, of the compassion of the nefesh elokis, is, for example, that it's difficult for you to give that money to charity. And you can have all the reasons, and some of them you could even find the Shulchan Aruch, why you shouldn't help that person. This is you need, and this is what you have to pay it. Whatever the reason is, you can even find it in Kedusha, let's say. But let's say not particularly in Kedusha, but in your mind, in your healthy mind, you're going to find many reasons not to give this money to stuff, or to help this person. And you turn back and you say, no, I'm going to do it. Sure, it's an expression of compassion, but it's compassion together with avodas Hashem. I made a decision despite that I did not want to give, and I gave. That's a godly expression, and that Rachmanis is certainly aligned with the nefesh elokis. But when you see somebody in torn clothes and it's a very sad state, and you go, oy Rachmanis, there's nothing particularly godly about it. It remains the makeup of the Jew. Like you said before, the Goy doesn't even have the Nefesh HaBahamis. And not necessarily the Goy will say, Oy Rachmanis, maybe he will, maybe he won't. But the Yid will probably you will find it, you'll hear it quicker from the Yid to say, Oy Rachmanis, and to sigh and to say, and krechts, and which is again sighing and saying, how could this happen? Or you hear a bad piece of news, a Yid will express himself with expression of Rachmanis. Or Gemilas Chasadim, he has an extra few coins of change, and he sees a guy ask if it's stuck, he put it into the person's hand. What you see, a great expression is that, and the way an exertion of the nefesh elokis, not necessarily. This is the nature of a Yid. He's a Gemel Chesed, he's a Rachman. but it wasn't not aligned with Avodas Hashem. There was no service, there was no decision. I mean, if you're holding 10 things, you have to stick your hand in your pocket. That's a little bit of Avodah, but just, you have extra dime, you this, and a guy is with torn clothes, and he's especially someone you gave it to him, or you express your compassion to another. It's not particularly aligned with your godly soul. This is the makeup of a Yid, and you can even attribute it to the animal soul of a Yid, because you find that, again, you're dealing with not a Yitzhar Hari, you're dealing with Nefesh Bahamis, an animal. It's not Kulira, it's not all bad. Like he says over here, and where does the type come from? Where does the Yid's type come from? In other words, where is there goodness in a Nefesh Bahamis by definition? And where does the soul come from that it has this type to the extent that the siman, the sign of the Yid, according to Torah, is found in the Nefesh Bahamis? So he says yes, because he's B'Yisrael by Yid Nefesh Zud Klipa Miklipas Neiga. It's interesting. It's not only just an expression of goodness. The simanim, the signs which Torah says you want to know, you want to classify. You want to easily classify a Jew. You have these three signs: Achmanis, Gemilas Chasadim, and Baishanim. And where are you going to find it? One's going to say, if that's the way you classify a Jew, for sure in the Nefesh Elikis. This is in the Nefesh Bahamis. But why? Because the Nefesh Bahamis, Nefesh of the Klipa, he Klipas Nega. It comes from Klipas Nega, which we'll find out in later Prakim again, the definition of Klipas Nega, which is called a neutral type of Klipa. And Al Tereb is going to say later that there's the three levels, the two extremes and the one in the middle. The two extremes one is kedusha, holiness, a mitzvah, avodas Hashem, learning Torah, doing mitzvahs, or the object of the mitzvah, the tefillin. What is the tefillin? Especially the tefillin, the way the actual boxes, or the mezuzah, or the Shabbos candle, especially when they're used to constantly perform the mitzvah of tefillin, or lighting the Shabbos candles, or the mezuzah. Where does it receive its energy? On what side is it? It's obviously in the side of Kedusha. Then you have something which is associated with Shalosh Klipas Atmeis on the other side. Complete Klipa, complete Tumah, and Torah says stay away from it. You don't have to look far. Take, for example, something which is not kosher. I'm going to eat this, and I'm going to feel so much better, and with the energy of that food, I'm going to learn my piece of Gemara. Sounds good. Right? You will have the energy. But Torah says with all those good intentions, stay away from that, because not only will you be able to elevate that will bring you down to places you don't want to be. Because that is totally tamei, impure. It receives its energy again. We're going to soon see the term in Kabbalah, Shalosh Klipas Atmeis, and therefore Torah says stay away from it. And it's not only in context of food. This is the 365 Avedas or mitzvahs asay, laisasa, which Hashem says don't be smart, stay away from it, and don't try to elevate it, because you won't. It has too much negative energy; it'll bring you down. And then there is the in the middle, which is called Klipas Nega. And take the apple, the cup of water. Is it holy? What's so holy about the cup of water? There's nothing holy about the cup. You can't compare it to a mezuzah or a pair of tefillin. It's right in the middle. This is the question. It's neutral. This is all what I'm going to do with it, right? Your car you have going frontwards, backwards. Not always backwards is bad, right? But you're thinking about the frontwards, backwards. Neutral. Now I could do it. I could bring it to a state to bring it go front, and because I'm neutral, I can bring it to a state to go back. Similarly, I could take the cup of water, and because it's neutral, there's nothing particularly holy about it, but it has the potential, because Torah did not say that this water is asur. So it's already away from Shalosh Klipas Atmeis. It's cut away. It's not anchored into that world of impurity like Shalosh Klipas Atmeis. It didn't say it's usher. So on the other hand, it's not particularly kaddish, it's not holy. So I could pour a cup of water, make a bracha. So if I make a bracha and I drink it, I feel good, and with that good feeling, I'm able to concentrate on the next few lines of the Torah I'm learning. Not only the Torah I'm learning is holy, and not only my state, I elevated myself through the Torah, but even the water is elevated to the world of Kedusha. Really, the water became Mamish Kedusha. The Lashon Al Tereb explains, he can say, there's nothing in between really. He says, Ka'ayla ka'karban, like an ayla, like a sacrifice ayla, and it was the most holy sacrifice the Jews could ever bring is the ayla, because certain karbanas, certain sacrifices, the Mizbeach had, the Kayin had, and certain parts of the certain karbanas, like the shlamim, even the bailim, the one who bought the sacrifice was also enabled to benefit from that sacrifice, to eat part of the meat. The karban ayla, not the kayin, not the bailim, not the kayin, Everything was brought into the altar. So if you think about it, the type of sacrifice, the most sanctified sacrifice which exists in Torah is the Korban Olah. Comes the Alter Rebbe later, I think the 7th chapter, if I'm not mistaken, I believe the 7th chapter, he writes that when you utilize something which is in the world of Klipas Nega with a holy and a divine purpose, you elevate that, and that becomes Ka'ilo K'Korban, that becomes like a Korban Olah. It's interesting, you say Ka'ilo K'Korban, but that's, to the extent, don't think that it's anything less. And the question is, how could that be? How could something which a moment before I drank and a moment before I made a bracha, with proper intentions, it was Klipas Nega, was right in the middle, and then it could be brought up to the world of Kedusha, like the Peret Tefillin, like the Olah, the Korban, like the Mezuzah. The answer is, within Klipas Nega there is Taiv. There is a certain amount of good, and if I choose the good over the no good, and I subdue the no good, and again, that's by making a bracha and doing it and drinking it, in this case, right, in this context, and everything else, Klipas Nega, and whatever you do with it, in order to again to serve Hashem in the way you're doing that. But in this case, let's say we're dealing with water. The water has this enormous amount of good that I could extract the good, subdue the bad, and that's why it could elevate itself to the Korban. So this is what he says, Yesh bohem gankin teiv. And therefore, when you think about the simonim, thus simonim, which the Yid is defined as, again, achmanim, magaim lechasadim, they're people of compassion and people of kindness, and then you say that it also exists, and that also exists, so that comes from the Nefesh Bahamis. How so? Because it has enormous amount of good in it as well. This is similar like to the tree of knowledge. How does Hashem classify the tree of knowledge in the book of Bereshit, Genesis? It says, in the first parsha of Bereshit, it says, Eitz Hadas Tov, that the tree of knowledge had good and had evil. And therefore, this Klipas Nega, which comes from, the source of it is Klipas Nega, which is Eitz Hadas, it has Tevara. Therefore, that Midas Tevis, which innately exists within the Yid, that's attributed not to the Nefesh Elikis yet, especially again, it's not associated with Avodah. So it's attributed to the Nefesh Bahamis. Mash'enkim, we'll just finish this last 2 lines of it. Mash'enkim, and as opposed to the souls of the non-Jew, right, the Gentiles, they come they come from the other klipas atmeis, which again later the Alter Rebbe is going to classify the mishalosh klipas atmeis that don't have any good at all. Like the Eitz Chaim writes again in the 49th portal, Mishar Mem Tes Perek Gimel, the 3rd chapter. Again, as we mentioned before, that he divided his Sefer into portals. And in the 49th portal, in the 3rd chapter, he writes, that every goodness and every kindness which is expressed and extended through Gentiles, the nations of the world, as he says, they do it for their own sake. Like the Gemara says, Al Pasuk and the Pasuk Chesed Lumim Chatos, the kindness, Lu'umim, to the nations, you should know it's a Chatos, it's a crime, it's a sin. Shekol Tzedakah v'Chesed, we'll try to elaborate in a moment. Shekol Tzedakah v'Chesed Shum Yisrael Elam Eisin. All kindness. You came just in time as we're concluding.
I know.
It was more exciting. The Glimmer, the Greeks.
I apologize because they had this conflicting time. I will come next week though.
On the contrary, there was no negative energy when I said that. On the contrary, I respect your coming.
Because I did plan on coming.
No, don't apologize. Really, I understood right away. I came in. No, I heard about it. I heard about it, and it came in.
I came earlier to 10, but the door was closed.
Yeah. We just did. So on the contrary, a few guys were there. Yeah, 8:15 till 9. Yeah. No, not at all. Not at all, and much appreciated. Much appreciated. Have a great weekend.
You too.
It says, "V'chesed lo mischatos." That all the charity or kind acts which nations of the world do, it's only for the self-glorification. And now the question is, first of all, you mentioned before a name, we don't have to mention over here in the shir. The shir, especially a shir which is publicized, but this is a classic example. All those good words, those nice words, ultimately it's for me. What's going to be in this date, in this November or October, whatever. I run this project, this humanitarian aid project. It was once by this businessman, and I was showing him different things that was going on. And he was a long while supporter already, and I was showing him different things that we did lately, and this humanitarian aid distribution show. So I show it so he pulls over some of his workers which are non-Jewish, and he shows them, look at this, look at these distributions, some nice clear setup of pictures, dividing clothes and shoes and medicine. Wow, she says, it's a wonderful work, without skipping a beat. And it's so good because if it happens to us one day, maybe someone will look after us. Her spontaneity didn't say, people are in need, it's so nice to help them. It's so nice you're helping these people because maybe one day we'll be in need, someone should help us as well. That's the spontaneity of a Gentile. Now, chas v'shalom to say there's no exclusion, there are no exclusions, and there's no exceptions. Quite on the contrary, the Rambam himself says, and we've seen throughout our history, that there was great goyim, something which is, you could say, even a special icon of such a character was in the last generation. We had a famous guy named the Japanese embassy. Ambassador, yes, he said many Jews. Sugiura, Mr. Sugiura. For that matter, physically, Hashem decided. Ultimately, Hashem decided I should live over here in this time, in this generation. But naturally, the reason I'm here is also because of Sugiura.
Your grandfather.
His grandfather was saved because of Sugiura, as an example.
And also Schindler.
Correct. Right. There was many, but he was something special of thousands and thousands of Jews, and not only that. He knew he's going to be reprimanded. He knew he was waiting severe consequences, and it eventually happened to him. They fired him and they let him go, and they didn't care about him. In other words, he lost his job and he lost his parnasa, and he knew of those consequences, but he did not lose focus, and he utilized. He says, "I have an opportunity to save these people." He sacrificed his life, literally, to save thousands and thousands of Jews. That does not go along with something like this description of a non-Jew, of a Gentile. Quite on the contrary. He didn't do it for his own glorification, not at all. Nothing, people naturally glorify him today, but that's not what his intention was. He didn't do it because he's going to get any reward, because he not only didn't get a reward, he suffered great consequences as a result. So this is a different type of Gentile, which the Torah itself, starting from the Rambam, the Gemara actually deals with it, but the Rambam describes it in Halacha. It's called Chasidi U'Masailam. The pious, the special non-Jews, which they do not fit this classification. But we're talking about those who are not. You will see in our history as well that many people came out. That's why it says don't ever rely and don't get overly excited about government. People are close to you, and people you find you could get this favor from this one, that favor from that one, because ultimately, as it says in Pirkei Avos, they're doing it for their own benefit. The moment they feel that they're not going to get any benefit, you'll be the first one they'll drop out of their list. Because this is the nature of the guy. Now, how do you put it? When you're dealing with the deeper inner dimensions of what's standing behind the scene, why does he express himself this way? That even when he does kindness, it's ultimately for himself, for his self-glorification, or ultimately that he should gain, because look at the chemistry of it. He does not have that nefesh bahamis. So when someone asks you, I remember sitting with somebody, someone says, what's the difference according to the Alter Rebbe and Tanya of the guy and the Yid? He says, the guy doesn't have a nefesh likis, and the Yid has. The answer is so much more so. The guy not only doesn't have a nefesh likis, a godly soul, the guy does not have an animal soul. He doesn't have this nefesh bahamis. Because nefesh bahamis has toiv and ra. It has toiv. And because it has toiv, it could be elevated. And later the Alter Rebbe says not only a cup of water could be elevated to become carbon, even the nefesh bahamis could be elevated completely and become kind of the same interest in God, just like the godly soul, which is a part of God. Could you imagine the great transformation with an animal soul ultimately has the same interest, motivation, and desire to God, just like the godly soul, and maybe even more, as explained in Kabbalah and Chassidus, because of the something special with the animal soul. But even we're not talking about the virtue of the nefesh bahamis that it even has more than nefesh likis. The fact that an animal soul ultimately could express a love to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, just like the nefesh likis, that shows that deep down it has so much taiv. And when the Gemara deals with the simanim of the Yid, the signs of the Yid, Abayisharim and Achmanim and Chasadim, it's all within that taiv which exists in nefesh bahamis, what the guy doesn't even have. So the guy does not have those natural instinct, the characters of being compassionate or gemel chesed and so on. And when he does, you should know that there's ulterior motives. Does it mean that we have to completely lock out the goy as a result? Well, first of all, we're not talking about locking out the goy. We're talking about just facts over here, and we have to. And if he does have ulterior motives, and if a goy could help do something good, let him have ulterior motives. It's not that we're shutting out the whole that channel which the Yid and the Goy ultimately could contribute so much to Yid and Yiddishkeit. It says that's one of the nevuos of Mesa Mashiach, that not only Yidden will help each other, but the Goyim will help the Yid, because they will realize more and more the virtue of Torah, of mitzvahs, and the Eibishter's connection with the Yid. So it's just describing the advantage and the specialty of the Yid, that even his Nefesh HaBahamis has Tov, which that does not exist by the Goyim. Chassidium Esailam, we find that not only in the past generation of Sugiera, especially in today's times, and again, because we're coming closer to Mesa Mashiach, and by Mesa Mashiach it says, Hashem is going to get rid of and eradicate the spirit of impurity from the land. So more and more, if even the Goy sees and feels and in tune to the emes, the truth which exists with Torah and Eibishter and Yidden. Therefore, we find that in today's generation much kindness, or much that the Goyim itself would contribute to the success of Yidden, Yiddishkeit, and so on. But it still doesn't change. And again, if you find it and they're doing it with wholeheartedness, and they're not looking for their self-glorification, they're not looking for their self, like a garmaya, for their own gain, you could classify them as Hasidim Masaylam. But in the same token, the average, you should know that the difference of the Yid and the Goy is that even in comparison, you're not only dealing with Nefesh is the godly soul, Nefesh HaBahamis, which has Tov, Amiti, true Tov, even again, which exists within the Yid. Just conclude a little story. Now, it is a little, in the last 2 decades, the story, there's another interesting dimension to the story, because this was known for 200 years, or more than that, more than 200 years, till the downfall of the former Soviet Union. So there was a story which was roaming, and we grew up with it also. We grew up with the story, but later, after the downfall of the former Soviet Union, they got all the documents of the interrogations of the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe sat in prison primarily because of writing the Tanya. And again, there's a whole history. Why did they put the Alter Rebbe? Why did the Alter Rebbe was incarcerated? But later, when they found all the documents, they didn't find the story. Interesting. They found many other questions and answers in the interrogation. This story they didn't find. But what was the story? So like I said, I don't know how accurate it is once we learned that they found the documents, or they didn't document that. But the way the story went was that in the first Perek of Tanya, the interrogators, non-Jews, they asked many questions of the Alter Rebbe. And they said this question. They asked 20 questions. The way the story went, there's 20 questions, and the Alter Rebbe answered with much clarity, and he influenced them. In other words, to see his wisdom, his understanding, his knowledge in Torah, and particularly in the esoteric part of Torah, and they were really amazed with his answers. Goyim, later Alter Rebbe also, right, when he wrote the first letter after he was liberated to Rebbe Levi Yitzchak Berditchever, he said even that the biggest wonder, in other words, the miracle consists not only I was liberated, that even the non-Jews formally liberated me with honor, and they accepted, and they put kind of a stamp that Torah, Yiddishkeit, especially Kabbalah, Chassidus, is something very special. He said that was the real miracle. Not only was personally liberated, but that they themselves understood, and therefore the Alter Rebbe, we know the Alter Rebbe was liberated with much honor, and they gave him this Ezrach Nichbad L'Dorasav. He was a special citizen, the Schneerson family, because the way they liberated him, and there was the reason why they liberated, because they were convinced, not just let the guy go, but they're convinced there was something very godly and special and royal about this man. So one of the first letters he wrote to Rebbe Yitzchak Berditchever describing the nest, that it wasn't personal. So they asked him 20 questions on this perek, and he answered with much, accuracy and clarity and so on. They came to the last question, and they asked him, how could you write something like that? That the guy doesn't even have Tov Klal, doesn't have any good, and whatever good he has is just for his own gain, or to self-glorification. So the way the story went, Alter Rebbe smiled, didn't answer anything, he just smiled, and they stood there and they realized, and they said, okay, we'll go on. In other words, they accepted Alter Rebbe's smile as an answer. What was behind it? Because basically Alter Rebbe was going to tell them like this, what did Alter Rebbe smile? It was like a brilliant type of answer. They understood also what Alter Rebbe meant, which is also interesting. The Alter Rebbe was basically telling them, these were non-Jews asking the Alter Rebbe these questions. The Alter Rebbe was basically telling them, you saw how perfectly I answered the first 19 questions. and it was so convincing to you, and it was so accepting to you. So what do you want? You want me to go on explain you this that the guy has no type? I could explain you, and you know I could explain you thoroughly how the guy has no good within himself, because you saw that I explained you and I answered you so thoroughly and with such clarity the first 19 answers. So I will be successful in this 20th question as well, and I will be able to explain you how you have no good. Is that what you really want to hear? You don't want to hear that. So let's leave it at that. And they accepted it. They accepted it and understood that's what Dr. Rebbe meant in his smile. That we don't really want to hear that. So then, again, that was one of the turning points. Again, also they saw the brilliance of the Alter Rebbe. So, but later again, when they recovered these documents, which the Russian government gave it to the Hasidic Chabad, they said there was 100 questions they found, not 20, but this one wasn't there. So this whole story, I don't know whether, or they didn't document it, but this was a story this is Hasidim knew for generations, 100 of over 200 years. This is the way the story went. But it's an interesting story on its own merit, that this is the way it is. Look for it, you'll find it. In the same token, Alter Rebbe himself says elsewhere, in a number of places, and the Rambam brings, there is the concept of Chasidei U'Mesailam, which means this special goyim, which again we mentioned a few before, and we find it periodically. We see there's people who are genuine and special, even. Okay, great night, everybody.
Thank you so much.